Good morning and welcome to the Planning and Community Development Committee meeting for Thursday, March 18th, 2021. I'd like to call us to order and acknowledge that the SCRD is located on the territories of the Sechelt and Squamish Nations. We have an agenda in front of us today. There was one late item, so hopefully directors have that. You can get it from your sync folders or on the website. And that was annex, that was number 9. The Fire Smart Economic Recovery Fund grant application. So before I look for adoption of the agenda, are there any other changes that anybody would like to make to the agenda? Any additions? I see no hands. I am surprised that I have no hands. Can I have a motion to adopt the agenda, please? Moved, seconded, all those in favor? That's carried. Thank you very much. Can I have a motion to receive all reports and communications and minutes? Moved, seconded, all in favor? Thank you very much. Okay, moving on, moving straight into Annex A as we have no presentations or delegations today. We have Sunshine Coast Housing Needs Report Implementation Framework. So we'll turn it over to Mr. Sayao.
Thank you, Chair. So this is a follow-up report on the Sunshine Coast Housing Needs Assessment Report. This report builds upon housing data and analysis of the housing needs assessment and provides a wide range of policy options and implementation tools to address issues identified in the housing needs assessment. So the implementation framework can inform and guide SCRD's future actions and development of strategies and policies on housing, such as a regional growth strategy, official community plans, zoning bylaws, and other initiatives or projects. In consideration of the current affordable housing emergency on the Sunshine Coast, staff recommend a board workshop to be arranged to review the implementation framework and to provide information on the scope and mandate of the current SCRD services that could be used for implementation.
All right, thank you very much. Directors, Director McMahon, I see your hand up first.
Yeah, I certainly welcome the opportunity to take a deeper dive into this because there are many aspects of the housing situation that I don't understand well. The table on page 15 shows the roles of different agencies in the housing market, and it shows senior government as having no role in regulating and incentivizing. That seems incorrect to me, for one thing. For instance, the Residential Tenancy Act would be an example of a regulatory role of senior government. But I really am looking forward to the opportunity to discuss this, particularly as it pertains to the rural areas, and sooner rather than later. If we can get this on the road fairly soon, that would be excellent. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And I guess as a follow-up, I will ask the question. I know it obviously depends on schedules and availabilities and what have you, but I'm wondering if staff had any inclination of when we might try and do this workshop. Are we looking at, sometime in the remainder of March or early April?
Thank you for the question, Chair. Staff would strive to make something happen as soon as possible. At this point, that looks like 4 to 6 weeks.
Okay, thank you. Director Seegers.
Thank you. I'm wondering if there's sufficient differences between the recommendations between the 3 governments that are represented in the report that we need to have a separate workshop, or would this be something that we could have all 3 governments coordinate on? I haven't explored it in that depth. I've read them, but I haven't explored them in depth.
That's an interesting question. I don't know if staff have any comments on that at this time. GM Hall.
Thank you, Chair. I think we always strive for coordination, and this would be an excellent opportunity to talk about complementary action. Staff's particular note about the implementation framework is that the label local government sometimes doesn't fully differentiate between a rural district and a municipal framework, and so one of the hopes for a workshop would be to tease that apart. But that's not to say that there's not a coordination opportunity even in doing that. So staff can further explore that at a staff-to-staff level if that's of interest.
Just to follow up, that actually might be a way for all of us to be clear about the differences and what we can and can't do given our differing differing guidelines and legislation, etc. But if you look at it and you find that it's just too difficult to do, then I understand.
There's also the challenge of trying to get that many people together on one particular meeting date, because here at the SCRD we have certain days we expect to make ourselves available, and Sechelt and Gibson's are different. We might have to run 2 sessions. Director Hiltz.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, and thanks for the follow-up report. And I am definitely in the camp of need to know more about this. And so the question I have is kind of the scope of the workshop, the implementation versus the needs report. And so is the idea to kind of assimilate those 2 reports into the workshop? Because this report prompted me to kind of ask the question, how big is the hole that we're trying to dig ourselves out of? Which is kind of this, what is the current needs and the future needs? And I found it quite difficult to find in the needs report, but generally what it looks like is we are 500 units in the hole and we're going to be 500 units in deficit by 2025. And so that's kind of a number I'm trying to establish, is how big is the size of this deficit and the hole? So would that be considered part of the scope of the workshop to kind of assimilate that stuff and condense that 320 pages into something smaller?
GM Hall.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Director, for the question. I think if the committee has any particular requests for scope and would like to make those as a motion, that's welcomed. From staff's point of view, understanding that there is a housing emergency, and a number of us did participate in the housing emergency meeting a couple of weeks ago. I think staff's goal would be to provide as much detailed information when it comes to strategy as we can in a workshop format, so that we might support you as a committee in an open meeting to make decisions that would effectively address the emergency as it's manifesting itself on the coast, and particularly in rural areas if we hone in on the planning jurisdiction of the regional district. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Kroll, I forgot to, it only just dawned on me that you're here today instead of Director Beamish. So welcome today, and it's good to see you, and you're next.
Thank you, Director Toth. I certainly like the direction that Mayor Seegers was suggesting in, following the meeting that we had on the 1st that was organized by the District of Sechelt, and time sort of being of the essence, and what staff were indicating that it would be 4 to 6 weeks for a workshop, and then trying to realign that with the timeline that was suggested out of the meeting on March 1st. I would certainly be leaning towards a group workshop meeting. And as Director McMahon was saying is, what are the problems we've got between the rural areas and the municipalities, and can we hammer them out together? So I'd certainly, and I'm quite sure the representatives who attended the meeting from the town of Gibson's would be in support of a general meeting.
Thank you for that. Director McMahon.
While I understand that we should all try and get together on this. Herding cats is really quite difficult. So my suggestion is that we set up a workshop to deal specifically with the rural areas and invite all of the municipal participants who would like to attend, but set it up for us, because I think it's going to be too difficult to try and get together a date to move this forward. And I would also, I'd very much like to know what information we have and what information we don't have, because that's one of the chronic problems in the rural areas, is that often there's big holes in our data. And we are not in a position to go out and gather more data, but it's at least helpful to know what it is that we know and what it is that we suspect and what it is that we've heard on the grapevine and what it is that we don't know. Thanks.
Thank you. Director Ties.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I think it's a good idea what Director Seegers put forward. I think it's especially a good idea if there could be some sort of division of labor, that one section of the workshop could be taken over by Seashell Planning, one section could be taken over by Gibson's, and one by us, and that way it reduces workload on staff. If it creates more workload, then I think Director McMahon's approach might be better, just because I want to be cognizant of the amount of work that needs to go into all of this. So I think a discussion by staff and leaving it up to staff to figure out what the best approach is and the most efficient, I think is probably the way to go for me. And that's yeah, I'm looking forward to that workshop. I think it's a very necessary one, and it's a hugely complex issue.
Thank you for that. And I suppose a quick question for GM Hall. Would it be beneficial to add an additional recommendation in here formally to invite the Town of Gibsons and District of Seashelt councils and staff to such a workshop, or would you prefer that we leave it open?
Thank you, Chair. The extra direction is always helpful, and nobody's obliged to accept an invitation. We understand everyone's busy, but yes, a motion is helpful. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Director Seegers.
I'll make the recommendation as on page 1 and add that an invitation be put forward to the council and staff of the District of Seashelt and Town of Gibsons to join in.
And I see a seconder for that as well. Okay, I don't see, oh, GM Hall.
Just one quick question, Chair. In the spirit of inclusion, would we also like to include Seashelt Nation?
Director Seegers.
Are they actually included in the recommendations? Like I don't know how their planning works inside of this structure. I mean, we can invite them, and if they feel that it's worthwhile and that they could learn something and contribute something, then I mean they're welcome to come. So amend the recommendation to include the Seashelt Nation and staff.
And I see seconders for that. So, as GM Hall mentioned, nobody's obligated to accept an invitation. So, Director Kroll.
Thank you, Director Toth. Just out of, and I agree, courtesy is important. I would also, they don't have a huge footprint as far as property they have, but I would certainly include the Squamish Nation as well, because they do have the area in Area F on the Chuckwalp Reserve, and over the years they have discussed redeveloping that property into residential housing, whether it's market housing or for band purposes, but I don't think it would hurt us to include them in the invitation.
Director Seegers.
I'll second that.
So we have an amendment to add the Seashell Nation and the Squamish Nation to the invitee list. Do I have a seconder for that amendment? Thank you. Director Hiltz?
Yeah, just a question for staff about the difference between the regional planning function and the rural planning function. And as we put more participants into this, it seems to be more of the going towards the regional planning and the regional growth strategy. Is that kind of, rather than restricting it to the electoral areas? I'm just, does it make a difference to staff what function this service is directed at it? Like, I'm just learning about, points of view on that. 500 versus 504, yeah.
GM Hall?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, it absolutely does matter which service. Our CFO and our corporate officer could probably speak in great detail about the differences, but that is part of the reason why a deeper dive into this will be helpful, because there are certain aspects of this implementation framework that can readily be handled through one or the other of those services, and there are other pieces that might sit in a different service. So we look forward to working through that with you. Thanks.
All right. I see no further hands up. We do have an amendment to add the Seashell and Squamish Nations to the invitee list. So I'll call the question on the amendment. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you very much. We have an amended motion to invite the other local governments on the Sunshine Coast to this to the workshop that will be planned by staff. Any further comments, questions, discussion? Director Seegers?
Thank you. I think in the spirit of what Director McMahon and Director Tai said, we don't want staff to, delay putting it on, because the other governments, other members can't come. We want to move this forward quickly. So, put the invitation out, and if they can come, great. If they can't, great. We still move forward.
All right. All those in favor of the amended motion? And that's carried. Thank you very much. So, is there anything else out of this that anybody would like to speak to or make a motion to or anything like that? No? Excellent. Moving on to Annex B, Development Variance Permit DVP 00069 for 5986 Bluff Place. Back over to Mr. Seo.
Thank you, Chair. So this is a development variance permit seeking to reduce the minimum setback from the natural boundary of Ruby Lake from 30 meters to 15 meters for a proposed new dwelling and detached garage located at 5986 Bluff Place in Electoral Area A. Due to the size and layout of the lot, it is undevelopable without the variance. The reduced 30-meter setback is for the flood protection purpose, but it coincides with the lake riparian assessment area under the mandate of the official community plan and the provincial riparian protection area regulations. A riparian area assessment report for the area has been completed and determines a stream side protection and enhancement area of 15 meters from the natural boundary of the lake. So the proposed development is entirely outside of this protection area. And the report indicates that if the recommended monitoring measures are followed during development, there will be no harmful impact to the riparian area. A geotechnical assessment for the area has also been completed, indicating that the proposed development is safe from a flood protection and geohazard perspective. So the proposed new dwelling meets all other requirements of the zoning bylaw, including height, lot coverage, and side yard setback to the north property line. In addition, a development permit running concurrently with this application meets all requirements and is ready for issuing, pending on the outcome of the variance permit. So therefore, staff recommend issuing the permit.
Thank you very much. Directors, any questions, comments? Director Hiltz.
Thanks. The thing that is Director Lee mentioned this redevelopment that's happening in 1965 subdivision. It looks like this is the first of many redevelopments to be coming along. And the buildability, the kind of question I have is kind of on the service side. So these parcels are serviced by lake water. They're not serviced by regional water, as I understand. So does that process need to change as these developments come on board? Because people are talking about the size of the house, there's more people, there's more water being drawn. Is that factor into this? Is there any jurisdiction for reviewing the water source for these properties as they're redeveloped like this?
Great question, Director Hiltz. Who would like to answer that? You're essentially asking about the expansion of the water service areas in order to supply these supply redeveloped properties.
Well, it seems to be starting to go in that direction, right? So I'm just wondering, is this on someone's books somewhere about what's going on about this redevelopment? Because yes, thank you for rephrasing this.
GM Hall or Mr. Seau?
Thank you for the question, Chair. Staff would ask for a moment to review servicing standards as they relate to this property. If a response is helpful to making a decision today. Thanks.
Thank you. Actually, I'm going to ask Director Hiltz. Would an answer to that question at this time make a difference on your decision?
I doubt that it would make a difference on this one, but if I had another 10 coming along in the next couple of weeks, it would start to, the cumulative effects is starting to becoming, that's what I'm wondering about a little bit. So yeah, it would be, yeah.
Follow-up
a follow-up wherever staff would feel that there's valid in bringing it forward, but that's the concern, is we go lot by lot. And then we get to the end and going, oops, we didn't think that this is where we were going to end up. So that's, yeah, but yeah, at this point on this one-off, no, it would not. Yes.
Okay, thank you. Director McMahon.
Yeah, I think we're wrestling with the question of whether a precedent is being set. I was wondering if staff wanted to address any of the concerns raised by the APC on page 118 of the agenda. They seem to have quite a few concerns about this.
GM Hall.
Thank you, Chair. I'll let our planning team speak to this. I will say that as a process point of view on the matter, staff did, after receiving the APC's minutes and conferring with the area director, staff did sort of dig into the confusion that seemed to associate itself with the file, and it because there are both a development permit and a development variance permit associated with it. I think there was some confusion about the interplay of the two, and so staff did follow up to provide some additional information and kind of unpack that. But as far as how that confusion manifests itself, our manager or senior planner can perhaps add a brief explanation. Thanks.
Thank you. Did anybody else want to add on to that answer, or? Mr. Patey?
Thank you for the question. At the APC level, there certainly is some confusion about the interplay between development permit areas and specifically this variance in question. In order to kind of tease the two apart, the primary objective of this exercise is the variance to the streamside protection enhancement area, as well as the flood protection area. And that really is the focus of this application. The development permit is separate to this process entirely and is considered on the technical basis to be reviewed at the staff level as an administrative permit. So staff were, in our communications with the APC, clear on some of those points about differentiating and teasing those two things apart. There are, of course, other ways to include variances within permits, but we've separated those two processes and are handling the variance independently of the DP consideration.
All right, thank you very much. Director Seegers.
Thank you. I heard a couple of other things maybe behind what Director Hiltz was saying. So how is water provided to these lots? I think was one of the questions. And then, you know, concurrent with that then would be who actually provides the licensing for the water source? Is that something under our jurisdiction or is that provincial? Because I think that's part of the question. How is that being monitored and managed? So staff can take that away as well and provide some clarity.
If it's a well, it's going to be administered by the provincial government with probably some oversight from VCH, but I don't know if staff know offhand. Is this in fact connected to one of our water service areas, or is this well serviced by well water?
Thank you for the question. I'm looking into it at the moment, and I can provide an answer at a later date. We don't have servicing information provided on our mapping software, so it requires some coordination for the answer through our infrastructure department.
Okay, Director Lee.
I can answer that question. There is a community water system, but it's for Earls Cove. It's not for the Ruby Lake area itself, and it's regional water. And so there is no infrastructure in place for this subdivision to provide water. And the water is drawn directly from the lake, and the residents are expected to get a permit from the province, their own permit. That's actually quite common throughout Area A. It's a very similar situation to what we have for Garden Bay Lake itself, where there's people that live on the lake have their own systems and their own purification, and they manage it separate from the community water system. So that's the answer to that question.
All right, thank you, Director Lee. I see no further hands up. This is voting A, B, D, E, and F. Would any of my directors like to make a motion? Director Lee. You're muted, Director Lee.
Sorry, I note that the applicant and the neighbor are both in the gallery. I'm not sure if they wanted to comment or not. I believe they could have an opportunity if they wished.
Certainly they would have the opportunity to comment if they wished. I question our directors if you would like the applicants to, or the applicant or the neighbor to speak.
I did ask earlier in one of our process if in fact they needed to put an application in weeks ahead to talk about this or not. I forget what the actual answer was. Perhaps GM Hall could let me know on that one.
For sure. My understanding, because we've done it before, is that applicants are permitted to speak at this if we have any questions for them. GM Hall, you any further clarification?
I apologize. I don't have the detailed procedure language in front of me, but I believe, Chair, that you are correct. That's not a problem. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. So, I don't get to vote on this, but I don't have any questions for the applicant. Directors, do you have any questions for the applicant? Otherwise, would any of my rural directors like to make a motion? Director Lee.
Yes, I'd like to make a motion to accept the recommendation as listed on page 46 of our agenda.
All right, thank you. And I see a seconder for that. Thank you very much. Any further comments or questions? Okay, voting A, B, D, E, and F. All those in favor? All right, that's carried. Thank you very much. Moving on to Annex C. Thank you to the applicant and the neighbor for attending today. Moving on to Annex C, frontage waiver application FRW 0007 1225 Roberts Creek Road. And sorry, find my page here. Mr. Sayao, you're up again.
Thank you, Chair. So this frontage waiver is to facilitate a two-lot subdivision at 1225 Roberts Creek Road. Each new parcel will need to have access to Roberts Creek Road, and the location of the existing dwelling, the auxiliary buildings, septic fields, and driveway, and the need for a large usable lot area result in a lot layout with a panhandle driveway for the new parcel in the rear, which has a road frontage less than 10% of the perimeter of the lot. So therefore, a frontage waiver is required. The Ministry of Transportation has given preliminary layout approval to the subdivision. Staff considered the frontage waiver reasonable and recommend approval. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Director Ties.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I'm fine with the staff's recommendation. My question though is that it seems that sometimes these frontage waiver applications make it to the APC and sometimes they don't. This one didn't, and I'm just wondering if maybe staff can clarify what the criteria is for making them go to APC or not.
All right, thank you for that question. Mr. Sayao?
Yes, thank you for the question. Because the technical nature of this application, this is, and due to this very minor nature of the subdivision, is a very small subdivision of two lots. Staff has determined that it's unnecessary to refer the subdivision application or the frontage waiver application to the APC. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I don't, in the rural areas, it's just a simple question. This is the first one I've seen, but in the rural areas, how common are panhandle driveways? I know sometimes you can end up with visibility issues. And so I'm wondering if the preference when working with a property owner is to try to not have them develop a panhandle driveway, or if it really is up to them, and if they need it, then they have to come looking for a waiver. I'm just wondering if staff can comment on that. Mr. Sayao?
Thank you, Chair. So there are no policies or regulations in the SCRD, OCP, or zoning bylaw that prohibit the design of panhandles. And however, is due to the topography of the Sunshine Coast, it is quite often that the lots need to have this type of panhandle access to the road. And because the SCRD is only a reviewing agency in the subdivision application, and it's not the approval agency. The approval agency is the Ministry of Transportation. So we rely on the technical expertise of MOTI to determine safety of the driveway and access to the road.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you. Director Ties.
So yeah, just as a follow-up to clarify, so I guess if the application was a bit more complex or would access more lots, then It would be referred to the APC, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. And normally, if a subdivision has more than 10 lots, we would refer to the APC, and we'll have a public information meeting as well.
Okay, thank you. Directors, Director Tice, I see your hand up again.
Yeah, I'll move the recommendations on page 66.
Thank you, Director Tice. I see those seconded. Excuse me, this is voting A, B, D, E, and F again. I see no further hands up, so I'll call the question. All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you very much. So moving on to Annex D, TELUS telecommunication tower in Twin Creeks. Talk about alliteration. Request for local government concurrence. Back over to Mr. Seau.
Thank you, Chair. So this is a request by TELUS to provide local government land use concurrence on a proposed 73-meter tall telecommunication tower to be located on a private parcel on Port Melon Highway near Twin Creeks. The purpose of this new facility is to improve wireless communication and rural internet service to residents, businesses, and tourists in the Twin Creeks and Port Melon area. And improve communication capacity in the area is also beneficial to service, search and rescue, and other emergency response organizations. TELUS has applied for a 10-year on the adjacent provincial land to facilitate running electrical wires from the highway to the tower site. TELUS has conducted the required consultation with the public and received no comment from members of the public. The West House Sound Advisory Planning Commission recommend approval of the project. Therefore, staff consider this proposed facility appropriate for the location and consistent with SCRD policies, and recommend providing concurrence to the federal agency regarding this proposal.
All right, thank you very much. And you did mention that they were looking for a license of occupation for the across the Crown land for the utilities. So I know that was a question that had come up before the meeting. So directors, any questions, comments, motions? Director Hiltz.
Thanks, Chair, and yeah, thanks staff for the report. And TELUS did a presentation at the APC, and the general consensus is if you want to have cell phone service, you need towers. So that's a fairly persuasive argument for these people. It's an industrial area. It's not close to residents. It's, it is sort of almost the forgotten part of West House Sound. So, and there is a lot of traffic. So I'm happy to move the recommendations as presented by staff on page 69.
And I see a seconder for that. Thank you very much. Director Kroll.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to say from a search and rescue point of view, Station 14 in Gibson's, we have frequent calls up in that area, and the cell service is appalling currently. We had a situation about 18 months ago where a family, their boat sank. They ended up on a log boom. Had the incident occurred like 100 meters further, there would have been no cell reception. They were just lucky that they had the reception. We had another incident on Woolwich Island, and again, the only way that people were able to get a call out for help was marine radio. And there is quite an extensive development occurring on the Witherby Point property, and I'm quite sure the residents there would appreciate better service. So even though I don't get to vote on it, I think it is going to help. And certainly the residents on the west side of Gambier probably would appreciate improved service. So, for what it's worth, my 2 cents.
Thank you, Director Kroll. I see no additional hands up, so I will call the question. This is voting A, B, D, E, and F. All those in favor? All right, that's carried. Thank you very much. Moving on to Annex E, award report, request for quotation, supply and delivery of fire truck for Roberts Creek Volunteer Fire Department. And I see Matt Trite is the author on this report. Will he be speaking to it, or will somebody else be speaking to it? GM Hall, I see you unmuted yourself.
We do have Matt with us in the gallery. If IT could please move him into the meeting.
I believe I have that power as well. Thank you, GM Hall. I did not see him there.
Can everybody hear me?
Can hear you just fine. Good morning.
Okay, good morning. Thank you. Yeah, so this report is basically a follow-up to one from last year. 3 of our departments went out to RFP to purchase fire apparatus. 2 were successful. The Roberts Creek bid, the ones they got back, 2 companies didn't bother to bid on it. The one that did, it was over budget. And so we went out to RFP again this year. It came in we had to set a budget of $350,000. The truck came in on budget, but did not allow for the sales tax, the PST, to be added on. So essentially that's what we're coming back for here, is to access funds in order to up the amount to that 374 to allow for the purchase of the fire apparatus.
All right. Thank you very much. Director Ties.
Yeah, thank you, staff, for, I was aware of the history of that, so I'm happy to move the recommendations on page 100.
All right, and this is voting all. I do have a seconder for this. Any other questions or comments? Director Hiltz.
Thanks. I'm supportive of the recommendation, but the opportunity here is, it's if CAFO is able to ask, is in the past it has been said that the preference is not to have to amend the financial plan. In this case, it's absolutely necessary. But what was the rationale, particularly for not wanting, you kind of set the plan and you let it go on? So is it administrative? What are the kind of barriers, or why does staff prefer not to have the amending of the financial plan? I'm sure there's a good logical reason, and I just need a few words around why we do it that way.
Thank you for the question, Director Hiltz. Ms. Perot, did you want to speak to that?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So it's not a not wanting to amend the financial plan. It's that it's really not a best practice. I mean, we've just concluded our financial planning process. So what happens with amendments of the financial plan is it actually, per legislation, we actually physically have to amend our financial plan bylaw. So this particular item, we're actually going to include it because the draft financial plan is coming to March 25th. So it's going to kind of slide in there, but it's kind of outside of the process. So typically most local governments only amend their financial plan if it's for emergency purposes or for emergent items such as like a large grant award. The principles are generally that you have your open and transparent financial planning process and you adopt those things for the coming year and you kind of go on that cycle.
Thank you.
Thank you for yes, I appreciate that. Thank you.
I seem to recall reading somewhere that it's really intended that your amendments should have the same level of public awareness that your financial plan did in the first place, which can be difficult if there's many of them throughout the year. Directors, any other questions? I see no other hands up. So this is voting all. So I'll call the question. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you very much. Moving on to Annex F, Planning Processes, Administrative Improvements. I see the authors on this one are Dave Patey, Manager of Planning and Development, and Julie Clark, Planner 1/Senior Planner. So I don't know who would like to speak to this first. Ms. Clark, I see you've unmuted yourself.
Good morning, directors. staff are preparing to implement administrative process changes in 4 different areas of development planning work. And as SCRD's planning processes touch and interface with the timelines, processes, and work of elected officials, as well as the advisory planning commissions and the community, staff are bringing this report forward for information in advance of implementation and recommend that it be referred to advisory planning commissions for information and also be addressed in upcoming APC orientation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Director McMahon.
So I'm going to ask a sort of a Director Hiltz type question about our lanes here. So this is a process which is operational. So strictly speaking, this is not a board decision. Like if we say, wow, we really don't like this, or our APCs jump up and scream at us, what is the procedure here? Do we have to approve this or not?
Very good question. GM Hall, you've unmuted yourself.
Thank you, Chair. So there were a few questions in the director's remarks there. Strictly speaking, yes, this is administratively procedural and does not require board direction. And staff would add that what's proposed here is actually taking us closer in some cases to what is written in our existing bylaws and procedures. That said, staff always want to work with our elected officials, respecting that we support each other. And so awareness and support is appreciated. And I guess with regard to what happens if, well, we'll be pleased to cross that bridge with you if we get there. We feel there's a strong business case with benefits to all the players in the planning field to these realignments, and we can change things if we need to, and we'll look for feedback from you and from our community and from our APCs to guide us. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that answer. Director Ties.
Thank you, staff. And yes, I'm happy to move those recommendations. And I'd also like to add the OCP committee as one of the referral bodies, the Ottawa Speak OCP committee, because I think they always have questions around the processes in place. And I think it's good for them to learn about them and have a bit of a discussion about them.
Okay, that was a recommendation. Do I have a seconder for it? Seconded. Thank you very much. Director McMahon?
Yeah, in fact, I am supportive of the recommendations, but I do have a few quibbles, and perhaps the time to raise them is at the APC. My concerns are around the subdivision process in areas like mine, where all the large parcels are already subdivided. And as was pointed out, the easy builds have been done. So we're getting some interesting things coming across the transom that don't necessarily meet the criteria of 10 lots or 10 hectares. The other part that I would be interested in is how do we communicate around provincial referrals? That I think it's entirely appropriate for us to use the provincial portal, but in order to use it, we need to know that the referrals are out there so that we can alert community groups and other concerned citizens to go and make use of that provincial portal. And finally, will there be a follow-up on this after the implementation of new procedures to measure the effects, to see if the improved procedures have the effects that we all hope they're going to have?
Thank you, Director McMahon. Did anybody want to? GM Hall, I saw you unmute yourself.
Just very briefly, Chair. Yes. Staff's goal here is to assess and plan for improvement of some key metrics. And so some of that is underway already, and these realignments will help us advance that. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. I see no further hands up. This particular item is listed as voting all. Yeah, so I'm gonna call the question on that. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you very much. Moving on to Annex G, Sunshine Coast Regional District variable ice cost and 2021 spring ice. I don't see Mr. Don with us today. I do see GM Hall.
And we do have Mr. Don with us in the gallery. If IT or you, Mr. Chair, could bring him in, please. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Don. Are you with us? Perhaps not.
Well, perhaps we can get IT issues sorted out there. Apologies for that. Chair, I'll, as an introduction, offer that SCRD's administrative procedure for a number of years and affirmed in 2019 is that spring ice, so that's ice beyond our core ice season, is offered if the demand for ice is adequate such that variable costs of providing the ice. So that's the incremental cost of running the ice plant and staffing the service required to provide ice are covered by that demand. And so every year we assess that demand through a call for ice rentals, and we, in the past few years, have been providing an informational update on the results of that, informing the committee about whether or not spring ice will be provided. And in this case, with noting the impact of the public health order on restricting the activities that can happen on ice, the incremental costs are a long ways from being covered. And so even with a slight loosening that might allow some more gameplay, we're still in a situation where variable costs are not covered. And so ice is not planned to be provided past the end of March. And we do now have Manager Don here, so if there are any questions, either he or I would be pleased to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Mr. Don, was there anything further you wanted to add before we take questions?
I will just add, I tuned in about halfway through Ian's comments there. I just wanted to add that in order for user groups to cover the variable costs, it would look like 79 hours a week of prime time ice, which is quite far ways off their current commitment, 15 hours. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Directors, any questions, comments? Director Hiltz.
So I guess the question that we're being posed as a board is, do we want to run this deficit and pay for it by taxation, I guess, is ultimately the question that we're being asked of staff.
Well, ultimately, this report is received for information. GM Hall did mention that the plan is to not have spring ice. I think the idea here is, if we disagree, we need to put forward some sort of motion countermanding staff's general direction. But I will just look to GM Hall to confirm that that's sort of the outlook here.
Thank you, Chair. I suppose so. Staff prepared this as a matter of normal business, and then the committee will see that there's correspondence from a couple of our ICE user groups included on the agenda, and that correspondence came to us, was received by the regional district following staff communication with our user groups about the results of of the call for rentals. Thanks.
Thank you. Yeah, and that is Annex M and Annex N in our agenda packages, those corresponding letters. Director Kroll.
Thank you, Chair. I was going to make mention of the correspondence because, you know, one can immediately appreciate what's going to happen as soon as it's announced that ice is available or not going to be available. And I suggested it once before, and I'll suggest it again, that you know, if the user groups are not going to utilize the service at the level it needs to be used, but they want the ice in place, that they reach out to the corporate sector for support. It's done in other areas, and you know, I think it might work here. So that would just be my suggestion. You know, there was reference in one of the letters to the Gibson's pool and the support it was given with respect to reopening, and you know, there wasn't any change in the date that was proposed by the board in the opening of the pool. So I just wanted that noted as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Kroll. Director Seegers.
Thank you. While I sympathize with the hockey parents and the kids, I mean, I had a son who played hockey too, and very much involved in hockey right now out in Calgary. He coaches his son in hockey, he coaches his daughter in ringette. You know, we're still seeing, in my world, I think we're still seeing too much uncertainty around COVID. We're seeing Europe now starting to have their third wave with the variants. And while we've had very slight relaxing, we don't know. We're still seeing so much uncertainty around this that we don't know what the future is going to bring and whether or not it will actually open up a bit or if it's going to close down some more. So I think it's too much of a risk at this point for us to request that staff keep this open, incur the additional costs in the face of that uncertainty.
Yeah, at this point, we're looking at a best case scenario of a $40,000 deficit. And that's a lot of money, especially, you know, that's if the public health order is reduced in any way. And like you've mentioned, Europe and just numbers are not going down. I don't see it happening anytime soon. You know, my daughter was in soccer this last year, and they cut the season short at the start of 2021. And they said, you know, if the public health order is relaxed, we'll try and get out and play some more. They tried pushing the season, the end of the season out to the end of March or the start of April. And they reached a point where they just went, you know, it's not going to change. And they canceled the rest of the season. And I don't think it's unreasonable to expect that that's going to be the case, at least for this year. So, Director Ties.
Yeah, I think I echo Director Seeger's sentiments. I also think that this whole situation puts the board into the unenviable role of actually being the only people advocating for the average taxpayer. Whereas, you know, we have a very vocal on ice community, and generally the average taxpayer isn't aware of what's going on, and so this is a considerable cost. And I love hockey. I miss hockey, and I haven't been able to play it since last October. So I can very much sympathize, but I can't justify this expenditure for potentially just figure skaters, and this is an unfortunate time, and I wish I could be more supportive, but I can't justify that expense.
Thank you, Director Ties. Director McMahon.
Yeah, and I'm just going to point out that there's not much point having policies if we go and go against them every year. So, you know, I'm looking forward to now that we've got a new general manager starting real soon now. maybe there'll be an opportunity to take a deeper dive on some of the perennial recreation situations that keep coming to the board, whereas they really should be operational. Thanks.
Thank you. Director Kroll.
Thank you, Chair. Just sort of in follow-up to what I was mentioning earlier about corporate sponsorship, when you look at corporations like Rogers Communication, who paid billions of dollars for the broadcast rights for hockey, and the money they generate in advertising revenue through the broadcast of hockey games, we won't, and some of the corporations that, you know, own teams, you know, it's almost another of these sort of trickle-down effects. The guys at the top make all the money, and it's the communities that end up providing the services to train the players who ultimately become hockey players. And I think, you know, it is a lot of money for a community to put out to, you know, I don't begrudge the facility being provided, but what I do find it awkward is when it gets put across you know, people who probably have never set foot on ice to pay for it. So I really would encourage the people that want the ice to seek corporate sponsorship. The money's out there, you know, and it's just getting your hands. I wouldn't suggest they approach Amazon. Amazon's not great for supporting community endeavors, but there does seem to be a lot of Amazon boxes in our landfills. So anyway, I'll leave it at that.
I didn't get signed. I didn't get the sign, Director McMahon. Thank you, Director Kroll, for those comments. There are no specific recommendations further that need to be brought forward. This was for information. So seeing no further hands up, we will move on. Thank you, Mr. Don, for joining us today. And moving on to item number 9 in our agenda package. This was the report that followed. Fire Smart Economic Recovery Fund grant application. And I don't have it open now, but I assume that Mr. Trite will be speaking to it.
Yes, Chair, thank you. So this was a grant opportunity that came along fairly quickly. I just became aware of it at the end of January. It has to be submitted by tomorrow. It's been a bit of a rush to get it all assembled. And what it is as you're well aware, we're underway with our community wildfire protection plan, which should be done here in the next few weeks. And the original intent was, once we had that plan in place, we would start applying for more funding to carry out some of the activities, some of the recommendations from that plan, fire smart activities and so on. Then this opportunity came along, and it dovetails very nicely with what our community wildfire protection plan will be recommending. And so it's they call it the Fire Smart Economic Recovery Fund. So it's designed to improve fire mitigation, as well as create employment in response to the unemployment caused by COVID. So we've been working with, it'll be a regional application. We've been working with Shishal Nation, District of Sechelt, Town of Gibsons to put together a regional application. There are a few specific projects in a couple of those jurisdictions. As well, we're requesting funding overall for a couple of Fire Smart coordinators and to be able to hire a contractor to remove vegetation from people's property and dispose of it. So I'm happy to take any questions on that.
Thank you very much. Director McMahon.
Sounds like a great initiative. Free money, well, it's not really free, but we like more money. More money is good. I was highly amused to realize, of course, that the fire department has a cedar shake roof. Maybe we should rethink that in general going forward. But I'm happy to move the recommendations on page 113A.
All right. And I see a seconder for those. So thank you very much. Those are on the floor. and my speakers list has almost entirely disappeared. So I assume everybody wanted to move those recommendations. Director Hiltz, you're up.
Thanks. I'm wondering about the local government list. There is, in the Islands Trust isn't specifically mentioned. So some of this area might be in the Islands Trust jurisdiction as well. So is there any connection by this application and Islands Trust? Like, should we inform them somehow? Would a letter of support be useful, or is it strictly those who are participating in kind of the funding sources?
Sorry.
No, go ahead, Mr. Trite.
Oh, thank you. The activities will include the islands, the Fire Smart activities, certainly having the coordinators. They weren't listed. I don't have the Islands Trust listed as a regional authority, and it wasn't one of the ones suggested in the application that spoke of local government and First Nations. So I don't think it's necessary. I don't think it would hurt to have a letter from them, but I don't believe that it's necessary.
Okay, thank you. Director Seegers.
Thank you. Sometimes with these grants, they request that the letters be in a certain format or have certain words. If that's the case, I know this quick turnaround. So two things. If there's a time frame by which that you need the letter, let us know that as well. If there's wording that's required, that would be nice to have come forward as well. And then we can turn it around as quick as we need it. Thank you.
All right, thank you. CAO McKinley.
The only thing I'd like to add is Matt indicated that it was something that came up fairly late and we didn't have a lot of time to put into it. And I just wanted to acknowledge that a lot of people did a tremendous amount of work to scramble this thing together. Matt especially. Tina was incredibly helpful, helping navigate the complexities of having a regional district serve as the applying entity for multiple jurisdictions. And once again, it gets complicated by being a regional district. So just a lot of appreciation for a lot of additional unplanned time that went into this, because the initiative itself is outstanding. The opportunity is outstanding. And it's great to see that we were able to scramble it together. And a big thanks to everyone that made it happen.
Thank you for those comments. Director Kroll.
Thank you. I'm just wondering, are the letters, I'm assuming the letters of support are not contingent on the application being submitted tomorrow.
Thank you. Yes, that's correct. They're allowed to follow.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay, I see no further hands, so I will call the question. This is voting all as it's Sunshine Coast Emergency Planning. All those in favor? Okay, that's carried. Thank you very much. All right. Thank you, Mr. Trite.
Thank you.
So moving on to Annex H. We're actually into our minutes at a reasonable time today. Excellent. Moving on to Annex H, AAC minutes from February 23rd, 2021. I believe there was a couple of points in there that needed to be brought forward. I had one question with regards to recommendation 2 in that. The AAC committee supports the report Sunshine Coast Food Charter. Is there anything further that we need to do with the food charter? Does that need to come back? Does that, I know we've seen it, I just can't remember where we left it. And my apologies, GM Hall.
Thank you, Chair. I believe that the initial request as received was for endorsement of the food charter, and on receipt it was referred to the AAC. So at this point, staff would suggest as a next step that it be referred back to staff so that we can make a legislative review and then bring forward a recommendation that responds to the initial request for endorsement. Thanks.
Okay, so you're looking for a recommendation to refer this to staff for follow-up.
Well, that would be staff's advice on process if it's the committee's wish to see this move forward. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. Director Hiltz.
Sure, I'd like to take staff's advice and refer it back as, yeah, it was closing the loop AAC says, go for it. It's not going to change agriculture. So it's back in the political realm and to take the advice from staff. So a motion to refer back or send it back to staff for the legislative review and further information.
Perfect.
Report back. Yeah.
Do I have a seconder on that? Seconded. Thank you very much. Seeing no other hands up. All those in favor? Okay. Director McMahon?
I would also like to refer recommendation 3 and 5 to staff for further review.
Okay, and that's cannabis production in the ALR, industrial cannabis production in the ALR, regarding strengthening of zoning bylaws, and also soil removal or addition possibilities. Okay, thank you. Is there a seconder for that? Seconded. Thank you very much. Any other comments, questions? All those in favor? Thank you. I believe recommendation 4, which was also a part of that, is more an advocacy level thing. That's something for us as directors to take on. I don't think there's any specific action that we need to take on that one at this time. Director McMahon, I see your hand up.
Yes. We do have a problem with ALR enforcement on the coast, because my understanding is that the nearest staff member is in Nanaimo and cannot get here in an effective manner. However, the question to me is a little broader than that, because we have a number of areas of provincial regulation where the enforcement on the Sunshine Coast is desperately lacking. And that includes, I had a bunch of calls about eagle nests recently, and there's issues to do with tree poaching, and there's a lot of issues where we are not able to get effective enforcement here. So I think we do need to follow up, and I'm not sure the best route, possibly to meet with our MLA. In this last year, we've had to innovate. Local government has been forced to innovate real quick. And one of the things that planning did, I remember, was to make some of the building inspections done remotely, like by phone. And so I've got to wonder if there isn't some process that the province could look at to make enforcement in remote areas more doable, that other than hiring an inspector or an enforcement officer for every jurisdiction in the province, which obviously they don't want to do. But we need a better method. So I don't know what the board's appetite is here.
Thank you, Director McMahon. I think it's an interesting point to try and start a conversation with our local MLA. Offhand, I can't remember, when is our next intergovernmental meeting scheduled for? Do we have one on the books yet? I'm getting a head shake. Okay. It would be a great topic to bring up at the intergovernmental meeting, should we ever have one again. Directors, do you have any other comments or thoughts on that? I had seen a hand up, but it disappeared too fast. I don't know whose hand it was. So, no, Director McMahon.
Yeah, let's stick a pin on this for the moment. This is definitely a Team Sunshine Coast problem, although it affects the rural areas more directly. We have a whole lot of enforcement issues. Parking's another one, where we have no effective means to. Usually there are regulations in place, but there's no enforcement. And in some cases, there's not even any regulations, never mind enforcement. So we need a better method going forward.
Thank you. Director Hiltz.
In terms of, yeah, I'm wondering about sticking the pin in and what we're going to stick it to. Is if this is kind of, you know, there's the bylaw enforcement and then there's the ALC, and is this some place where we could invite the ALC to come to as a delegation to explain enforcement? Is that like an opening salvo in terms of getting more information to have them present to the elected about how enforcement of ALR regulations, like I don't know if they've come, they did that workshop at Seaside Center 2 years ago. Is there time to kind of bring them back and say, could you tell, you know, bring us up to date? Is that an action we could do to invite them to come and present? That you know,
I mean, certainly we can issue an invitation, and has been pointed out, it doesn't require them to accept it. But Director Hiltz, that sounded an awful lot like a motion for a recommendation that you'd like to make.
I'd be happy to make a motion to extend an invitation to the AAC to present to PCD on enforcement of ALR regulations.
That's ALC you meant to say, right? I heard
ALC. Oh, right. Have the ALC present to the PCD about the ALR enforcement. I think I got the letters. Yeah.
Needs more letters. And I see Director McMahon seconded that recommendation. So I don't see any other hands up. So I will just call the question on that. All those in favor? Okay, that's carried. Director Crowley, you were hesitating there.
I just thought it was a good motion. I just was chomping at the bit to be able to vote on it.
All right, thank you very much. I think we've thoroughly exhausted the AAC minutes. Looking at our APC minutes, I'd like to look at annexes I, J, and K sort of together. If there's anything anybody would like to pull out of those. Director McMahon?
Yes, on page 122, there is mention of the receipt of Area E APC minutes for November and January, but we didn't meet in November and January. My APC has not met since June. So somebody has made a mistake there.
Or they didn't invite you. Okay.
How do we get that corrected?
That's a great question. How do we get that corrected? Who would like to answer that? GM Hall.
I apologize, Chair. Without a corporate officer here, I can't offer an authoritative process. I suppose if the recording secretary can make a note, we can record it in the meeting record and perhaps follow up, subject to advice from our corporate officer. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. Director Hiltz.
Thanks. Yeah, I did have a couple of questions. There was one question, it came out of the Area A APC, and it was there on page 118 about the proponent reducing the size of the currently proposed home. So my understanding is the only constraints on houses are height and setbacks. Is the actual square footage. There isn't anything that says you can't build a house of a certain size. We don't have any restrictions on ultimate floor. Oh, there is the percentage of floor area, but as long as you meet those, there's nothing that restricts it. Is that there's no absolute on the floor area?
Seeing your head nod, but Mr. Sayo, I saw your hand.
Yes, thanks, Chair. So there are no specific zoning bylaw regulations for floor area for a lot of that size. There's only height, lot coverage, and setback that have some control over how big a house can be built. And in that, for that variance, for that proposed development at Bluff Place, all those requirements are met. So there is no particular reason why that the house should be limited to a certain size.
Okay, thank you.
I did have one other question if there was no one else there, Chair.
Sure.
It was on the Area D APC, and it was the a topic I haven't been following, the non-medical cannabis retail license. I guess I've been ignoring this, and I'm just, what's the background on this? Like, I don't, is there an application status, I guess is what I'm wondering about.
Mr. Sale?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, SCRD has received a referral from the Liquor and Cannabis Regulation Branch of the province for a non-medical cannabis license store in that commercial area in Roberts Creek, where the Gumboot restaurant restaurant is located. So I can explain a little bit about the process of the review of a non-medical cannabis application. So when the LCRB receive an application for a license, they will refer to local government and ask us to gather the views of the residents of the area and provide a recommendation on the application, as well as a summary of the public feedback. And according to the SCRD's fees and procedures bylaw, we will charge the applicant a fee for the review, for the local review of the application. And the Cannabis Control and Licensing Act prescribes several public consultation methods for the local government to consider. These methods include receiving written comments in response to the public notice of the application, conducting a public hearing in respect of the application, holding a referendum, or using another method the local government consider appropriate. And in consideration of the current public health restriction of SCRD and the SCRD's capacity, staff have opted for the method of written comments in response to the public notice of the application and a referral to the area APC. Public notices were published on the newspaper, on SCRD website, and sent to the surrounding property within 100 meters. And the distance is the same as for a zoning bylaw or OCB amendment application. So that's basically how the process goes. So once we receive the feedback from the public, staff will prepare a report for the board for with a recommendation on the application.
Okay, thank you very much. Director Ties.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to address to that neither the APC nor the OCP committee had any objections to it moving forward, but they were concerned that not enough people in the creek got to know about the application. But to some extent, it's difficult to reach everyone if people, you know, I think we've made a reasonable effort, and I think by informing those people that live within 100 meters, and I hope that the store owners in the vicinity were also consulted. I think that they would probably be the most affected. So that's, I guess my question is, were the store owners and the business owners in the area asked as well, or just the residents, or informed, I mean?
Mr. Sale?
Yes, of course the store owner it is applicant, and staff have conversation with the owner regarding the proposal. Yes, yes, yes.
Director Tice's question was regarding surrounding business owners
business owners
for notification.
The notification is to property owners within 100 meters, and that will include owners and occupants or property within that radius. And in terms of business owners, it will be up to the owner of the property to notify the tenants of, say, a commercial property.
Okay. That's actually not what I expected. Process in Seashelt with a referral is that it's delivered to all of the, if a business is affected, it's delivered to the businesses that are affected. But thank you for that clarification. Director Kroll?
Just sort of an inquiry in the town of Gibson's with the sort of cannabis outlets. There is a regulation with respect to the distance from schools, which is in excess of 300 meters. And I'm just wondering if that stipulation exists in the regional district, and would it be met with the location of the school?
Mr. Seo?
That regulation does not currently exist in SCID's either zoning bylaw or OCPs. And comments have been received mentioning the desire to have some distance from school to the store. And staff will conduct further analysis on this topic, and will present it in the upcoming report.
Follow up, Director Kroll?
I'm just wondering, the school board is aware of it, though. Is that correct?
The school board is aware, and they have provided comment.
Okay, thank you. Director Tice?
Yeah, I had similar reflections myself. I think actually the danger of being next to an elementary school is probably lower than being next to a high school, because I don't think anybody's going to mistake a elementary school student for a 19-year-old. But that being said, I think it's good that some comment has been received, and look forward to the follow-up report.
All right, thank you. Seeing no further hands up about the APC minutes, we will move on to our communications, Annex LMNONP. Directors, any? Director McMahon.
Yes, I would like to refer the letter from the Howe Sound Biosphere Region Initiative to Scredo. I've had a preliminary conversation with the executive director over there, and they're interested in this. So do we need a motion to do that?
It sounds like you just made one. And I do see a seconder for that. It is worth noting that Ian Wynn, who is a director with the with this organization, is in the gallery if we've got any questions for him. But Director Hiltz, I see your hand up.
Yeah, thanks, Chair, and thanks for the Biosphere Initiative for sending in the letter. And I understand that they have spoken with staff, and I think there's general agreement that there is some potential here, and it's noted in the letter. I mean, there is some disagreement that what is a demonstration forest, and I'm saying it's demonstrating what the potential could be that hasn't been realized, and so kind of where I'm thinking of what's possible here. There are some things that are unknown about this, like 80 hectares of land. When I measured that using the GIS system, it's somewhat less than that, maybe half less than that. And the parcels are kind of distributed. There's a certain amount of alignment going on with the upstream aspect of the Dakota Bowl agreement. SCRD has interests from a diking point of view. There's also conservation areas down below. And this demonstration forest has been sitting there waiting for its potential to be realized. So, so whether this is could be a beginning of a budget proposal So this could go back to staff for a budget proposal in what's the next budget year coming up, 2021? 2022, to begin this process of bringing the public in early in the budget process. So that's what I'm kind of wondering is, can we enable staff to have some dialogue with this proponent and Scredo to formulate some possibilities, come up with a little bit more knowns, and perhaps come up with a budget proposal for the 2022 budget period. That's kind of where I'm thinking. Because the biosphere hasn't happened. It's a future potential. So the urgency isn't tomorrow, it's as we move forward into the future. So I think this might be a way to nudge Hillside back into the awareness of the regional district. So that's kind of where I'm thinking. I haven't had a chance to talk to staff about this, but that's some thinking on that.
I will ask staff if they want to comment at this time. We do have the recommendation on the floor to send it to Scredo. So that may be the way to sort of start that conversation and start that awareness. But being unwarned, I wouldn't expect staff to speak in great detail to any of those comments. GM Hall.
You're very kind, Chair. Staff's only comment would be that if the committee chooses to refer it to Scredo, staff can assure the committee that there would be inter-agency coordination there. Staff are in regular contact with Scredo about industrial land supply, planning for Hillside, the pre-work that we're doing on board direction around regional growth, including as how that relates to employment lands, and would see the Scredo's involvement on this particular initiative as just an extension of that. Thanks.
Thank you. Director Hiltz, did you have a follow-up or?
I do. That there is a service, the Hillside service, and so there is already a function that this seems to fall in nicely, function 540. So I guess the question, has staff got existing capacity within their work plan? Like, how much? It's a hypothetical. Is this going to interrupt the work plan significantly between now and September or whenever this? Can you fit it in? Is the nasty way of asking? Is this a capacity to do this work?
Jim Hall.
Thank you, Chair. Operationally, yes. Staff believe we could fit this in. There is a small allocation of time to Hillside, and staff do regularly address development questions or concerns in that area, and so no issues. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Director McMahon.
Yes, I was just wondering if perhaps Director Hiltz or former Director Wynn would be interested in leading folks on a tour or perhaps a bushwhack of this demonstration forest sometime in the future. I'm volunteering myself to go along and check this out because I've been curious about it for a while.
I will admit that I know absolutely nothing about it. This letter is the first inclination I had that there was a demonstration forest or a forest of any kind involved in an industrial park, but I would certainly welcome a tour or a bushwhack, as Director McMahon put it. Yeah, sorry, you bounced around a little bit here. I will call the question on the referral to Scredo, seeing no other hands. So all those in favor? All right, that's carried. Thank you very much. Director Hiltz?
Yeah, just to clarify, is staff got enough to kind of proceed with the referral to Scredo, or do they want something specific to their department in terms of say, yes, keep pursuing this?
GM Hall.
Thank you, Chair. Interesting question, given that this is sort of the ask here is a willingness to explore. And so the specific commitments other than coordination with Scredo are a little unclear to staff. I guess in the interests of clarity, if there's board interest in having staff work with Scredo on this, a motion to that effect can only be helpful. Thank you.
I would be hesitant to preemptively bind Scredo or our staff to an initiative without hearing back from Scredo about the initiative in the first place. But Director Hiltz?
For clarity's sake, I would just move that staff do what they can with Scredo, I guess that's my
perhaps that staff coordinate with Scredo and the Howe Sound Biosphere Region Initiative to explore the possibilities related to this site or something to that effect.
That's a good effect, I think. Yes, and I'll move those words, motivate those.
And I see a seconder for those. Okay, thank you very much. Is there any further comments or discussion? All those in favor of the motion on the floor? Okay, thank you very much. Is there anything from MNO or P that directors would like to discuss? Director Kroll?
Thank you, Chair. In the letter from Silas White, excuse me, in light of the housing crisis, last week at the town of Gibsons, we had a meeting where there are situations where bylaw was impacting on some residential to the point where people potentially could have been evicted had bylaw been carried out and enforced to the total letter of the law. So some guidance was given to bylaw and the building departments to work with landlords up until, or property owners up until the end of December 2021, in a situation as long as the safety of individuals was not compromised, that there would be a bit of a moratorium on digging in heels and basically forcing people out into the street. We sought legal advice on it. We drafted something, it went to legal, and I'm sure the town of Gibsons would be happy to share the information we received from legal with respect to this. In light of the housing situation, it was just, it became necessary just to sort of intercede, and staff were, just trying to do their job, but and we don't want to encourage, situations where safeties could be compromised, but also in light of the fact that people are in some pretty dire straits with respect to housing and affordable housing. We were just trying to ensure that they weren't evicted. And as I said, staff are continuing to work with landlords and property owners to bring the properties into compliance, but we've created some wiggle room and working space. So I would just like to, see that perhaps the same compromise could be extended through the regional district and the district of Sechelt.
Thank you, Director Kroll. I know that we did discuss this letter at council last night. We'd sort of talked about how our staff were cognizant of some issues pertaining to safety, but that generally speaking, our staff are sensitive to the fact that we are in a housing crisis. We chose not to take any further action on the letter at this time, after hearing back from Director Allen, who's our head of, who oversees our bylaw services. I know that CAO McKinley provided a quote in response to this letter to the newspapers. So I'd invite CAO McKinley, if he's got any insight or further remarks, to share those with us.
Probably only to say that our bylaw enforcement practices are already geared towards not removing people from their homes under untimely circumstances. It's not our practice. It's not our philosophy. We look forward to having this workshop, hopefully sooner than later, and looking at what we can do to address some of the issues around housing and some of the things around the housing crisis. We are working in certain spots with landowners who are trying to provide places for people to live and making sure that they're able to navigate our processes properly, and trying to buy them some time to do that.
Thank you. Director McMahon.
So let me turn this around a bit and say, so if the motion, as put forward by Mr. White on page 136, the suggested motion, is already in keeping with our practices, why not pass it? And provide the public with some assurance that we are taking this seriously, and that we will take it seriously at least until December the 31st.
CAO McKinley?
My caution on that would be that it would require more analysis to determine whether or not providing direction to do so is able to be done, given everything that we have in place in terms of bylaws. And that is why staff's recommendation is to convene this workshop to look at all the options we have and what the ramifications of taking certain actions may be, and what might have to be put in place in order to take certain actions, even if it seems like it might be innocuous or just supportive language. It may require a lot more in terms of what actually has to be done, and we have not had the time to adequately contemplate all of those things in the short time since we received the letter, which is why we made the recommendation to convene the workshop so we could do a bit of a deeper dive into this.
So rather than trying to take action on this letter today, perhaps referring this letter to the workshop for additional discussion may be a way forward for us on this. Director Ties?
Yeah, I agree that I think further action is not necessary at this point. Our staff is looking for voluntary compliance to our bylaws, and they're working with each and every case. And I think every case should be different. I think putting a moratorium could be a potential for abuse by people of the public that would then take advantage of this moratorium, rather than us being or having our staff be responsible on a case-by-case basis, and with the intention of making sure that there's voluntary compliance of our bylaws, and that we're moving forward towards mutually acceptable outcomes, especially if a bylaw complaint is involved, which means other people are being affected.
Thank you, Director Ties. I see no further hands up. Director Hiltz.
Thanks, Chair. I did have a question on Councillor McLean's letter, and it noted that it was going to be coming before Seashelt on March 17th. And I'm just wondering if the call to action did come before Seashelt Council, and what was the outcome?
It did. We had some discussion about it, about the points that were raised, and what of those items were actionable, and really the conversation revolved around, the District of Sechilt's portion of the actionable list is really only bullet point 6. But we did ultimately endorse it unanimously as a show of support for the greater collaboration around the region. That's the answer to your question, Director Hiltz. I would look to see if directors wanted to refer that particular item, Annex O, to that committee, to the workshop as well for further discussion, or if we wanted to have further discussion on it now. We are down a couple of directors today, so I don't know if you want to necessarily vote to endorse it now, or if you want to refer it to board or refer it to a workshop. Director McMahon?
Everybody's aware that we have a housing emergency. I'd be perfectly happy to endorse the need for action. I'm not sure that is actually an action. It's an action in favor of action. And we're moving forward. We're moving this forward as fast as we can under the circumstances, I think.
Director Lee.
Yes, I've been watching how this unfolds, and I think we need to refer it to the workshop to understand whether we have a coordinated activity here or if we're going off in a direction we shouldn't be going, and making extra work for ourselves. So I think we should refer it to the workshop and see if we can get a coordinated action plan to make this happen.
Is that a recommendation, Director Lee?
Yes.
And I see a seconder for that. So Director Hiltz?
Yeah, I just following on what Director Lee says, I'd like to see it as a package rather than pieces. And so I think staff's action of the workshop and kind of a comprehensiveness and is I'm interested to know who's on the working groups and how that's moving. I'm going to continue on a working group and leading towards that workshop. So yeah.
Okay, Director McMahon.
Yeah, just as a mention for the workshop, I'd really like to understand how people get information now on secondary housing, because it seems to me like there's different agencies and levels of government all over the place. And I personally would probably not phone the planning department and say, I'm looking at whether or not to make my illegal suite compliant with your rules. So I don't know how it works at present. So I look forward to more information at the workshop. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Don't see any other hands up, so I'll call the question. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you very much. I would like to, I'm happy to move it myself, referring Annex P to that workshop as well, just for some sort of as part of the greater package conversation. And I'm hoping that there is a seconder. Thank you, Director McMahon. I don't see any other hands up, so I'll just call the question on it now. All those in favor? Thank you. That leaves us with Annex M and Annex N in our agenda package. I did have one question for staff. I can't remember which one of these letters it's in, but it did refer to the variable costs, including a component that was for capital. And I was just looking for a little bit of clarification about that capital component. That's part of Annex N, the third paragraph from the bottom. 2885 for capital replacement. So GM Hall.
Thank you for the question, Chair. So the details of the incremental cost calculation were provided in the staff report back in 2019, and the capital replacement portion that forms part of that weekly calculation is just the subset of our larger capital replacement funding requirements, and it only relates to the parts of the facility that are specific to ice. So ice plant and Zamboni, I believe. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification. Directors, anything further from those two items of correspondence? I see no hands up. We have no new business. We have no in-camera section, which takes us to adjournment. May I have a motion to adjourn? Moved? Seconded? All those in favor? Okay, thank you very much. And we managed to whittle our attendee list down to 2, Connie, and somebody who I believe is phoning in from the regional district office itself. Connie, I can allow you to speak there. You should be able to unmute yourself.
Thank you, Chair Toth. I was just wondering about the ice arena's ability to quickly adjust should the provincial health order change sometime over the next 2 weeks that would allow for more gameplay and potentially make ice time extended into the April month possible. So what type of time frame do they need to maintain staff and to keep the ice plant in the situation where ice remains?
Thank you, Connie. GM Hall, are you able to answer that? Or
yeah, thank you, Connie, for the question. Staff remain attuned to changes in health orders and sport guidelines and are prepared to pivot if the thing we're all hoping for happens and we're able to offer more activities. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
all right. Anything else, Connie?
Nothing from me.
Okay. Thank you for sticking it out. I mean, it was a short meeting compared to some. So, all right.
Perfect.
Then I guess we will see everybody later. Well, not later. Have a good rest of your day.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for being with us, David.